The sound of distant gunfire had faded, replaced by an eerie hum that crawled across the field like mist. Kayla Rhine dragged herself forward, one arm pulling against the dirt, the other armored limb barely responding. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. Her face, smeared with blood and soot, was pressed to the cold earth of no man's land, a wasteland carved between enemy lines, indifferent to sides or sacrifice. Above her, the sky split with a sickly light. The moon hung impossibly large and fractured, a broken jewel that cast down glacial hues. Its surface was no longer familiar. Great metallic scars and artificial lights blinked like a silent eye, watching. It had been a symbol of hope once, back when this war still made sense. Now, it was just another haunted relic, looming over a battlefield littered with corpses, organic and synthetic. Her fingers scraped across the dirt until they struck metal. Reflexively, she clutched it, a rifle, half-buried, its barrel twisted from a blast. Useless. She dropped it. Her suit's internal diagnostics blinked red in her visor. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, power reserves at 12%. Her thoughts blurred, but one burned sharp and cruel in her mind. They left her. She'd heard it in his voice. Captain Vex Marrow, a name she'd once associated with command and control. When the shrapnel tore through her side and dropped her, she called out. Not for help, just confirmation. A signal that she was still alive, that she was still herself. She's hit, someone had said. Joran's voice panicked. Loyal. We move, Vex had answered, cold as the steel under her fingers now. We don't waste time on liabilities. Liabilities. She had fought beside them through ash storms and orbital strikes, through freezing nights without heat, watching her squad bleed and die. And yet when the moment came, when her blood mixed with the mud and her breath rattled in her throat, they left her. No med evac, no farewell, just silence. And the silence still stretched now, smothering the craters and wreckage like a blanket. Shapes shifted in the fog, bodies motionless, limbs twisted at impossible angles. One near her twitched, not dead yet. She pulled herself away instinctively, pain flaring in her side like a scream. The synthetic soldier, an old Gen 2 combat drone, its face a cracked porcelain mask, looked at her with dim, flickering optics. Then it shut down, steam rising gently from its broken torso. She paused, catching her breath, letting her heart slow from the panic. Her hands, shaking, found purchase again, and she crawled farther from the drone, deeper into the debris field. Every inch brought her closer to the wreckage of a downed transport. Cover, maybe supplies, maybe a miracle. The moon's pale glow seemed to mock her desperation. She reached the broken vehicle, its hull scorched and split. Inside, the pilot's body was still strapped in, the canopy shattered. Her own reflection stared back at her through a web of cracks, bloodied face, wild eyes, silver hair matted with sweat and dirt. Something inside her snapped the rest of the way into place. She was alone now. The proximity alarm of the suit buzzed softly. Movement. She ducked instinctively, peering through a gash in the transport side. Silhouettes emerged from the mist. Enemy recon drones, tall, insectoid, their jointed legs whispering over the terrain. She froze, pressing into the wreckage, holding her breath. They passed by, uninterested in the dead and dying. She waited until their footfalls disappeared into the distance, before she moved again. Her muscles screamed, but she ignored them. Pain was just information. What mattered was getting out. But where to? Her squad would have returned to the forward outpost, less than 10 clicks east if she could still trust her suit's nav. Maybe less now, if she cut through the ridge. She hesitated. Going back was suicide, but her thoughts shifted. She didn't want to go back. Not yet. As the moonlight caught on a shard of scorched armor nearby, she turned it over. The name etched into it was still legible despite the blast marks. CPT V. Marrow. Her lips parted in a breathless laugh that tasted like blood. What poetic cruelty. The universe handed her a totem before she even asked for one. The squad left her for dead. She would not return empty-handed. Not without his helmet. A low growl of engines pulled her attention westward. An enemy convoy rumbled slowly through the lower valley. 3 armored transports, their lights cutting through the dark like spears. She watched them for a long moment. Intelligence had said Vex was leading negotiations with defectors near the fallen comms tower. That tower was west, not east. The irony burned. He wasn't even retreating to safety. He was out there, playing diplomat, ensuring his own relevance while others bled for his glory. Kayla shifted her weight, rising slowly to her knees. Her vision swam, but she locked her gaze on the valley. She could slip in behind the convoy, track their trail, find a tower, find Vex. She clutched the broken shard of his armor tighter, slid it into a compartment on her suit. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reminding them what she was capable of. The wind howled through the empty battlefield, pulling ash into the air like ghostly banners. Kayla moved, slow but steady, every step forward a rejection of the dirt that tried to claim her. She passed the bodies of those she had once trained with, some marked by their own faction insignias, others stripped of identity by fire and decay. They looked at her with hollow sockets, as if to say, "Finish this." In the distance, the moon cracked silently across its middle. Or maybe it was just her vision. Either way, she didn't look back. The war hadn't ended. Not yet. And for one soldier left behind, it was just beginning. The cold bit deeper as Kayla pressed forward under the fractured moonlight, her body now part machine, part scar. Days had passed since she was left for dead in no man's land. She moved like a ghost now, a myth whispered among scattered infantry patrols. The woman who wouldn't die, the one who hunted shadows. They called her different names depending on which side told the story. Iron Wraith, Widow in the Dust, Hell Stray. She answered to none of them. Her own name meant less with each step toward the tower. Beneath a shell of reassembled armor, scrapped from drones and fallen mechs, her body was held together by sheer will. The nano bandages lacing her ribs had run out 2 days ago. The pain had dulled, not because she healed, but because it no longer mattered. Hunger had become routine, and the thirst she couldn't afford to quench dulled her senses, but not her purpose. Each night, she followed the smoldering trail left by the convoy. Vexmero was out there, surrounded by guards, and playing his game of diplomacy with turncoat factions. He'd abandoned the field to reinvent himself as a hero. Kayla had no interest in vengeance born of anger. It was quieter than that now, more deliberate. A correction. She would remind him that real command was earned, not seized through survival and sacrifice of others. The desert had shifted under her boots by the time she reached the shattered plains. A drone patrol buzzed overhead, scanning lazily across the ground, its blue sensors blinking in rhythm with the fractured moon's glow. She dropped low, breathing into the dust, and waited. The hum passed. She moved again. At the edge of the basin, she found signs of skirmish. Ashen outlines marked where infantry had fallen and vaporized into memory. One body remained. A young soldier slumped against a jagged piece of transport wreckage, his eyes still open. A knife jutted from his side, the wound burned closed by plasma. She knelt beside him, eyes sweeping over the insignia. Enemy, but barely. A rebel faction half absorbed in a Vex command, then abandoned just as quickly. A lesson in loyalty. She reached to close his eyes, but his hand flinched around her wrist. Alive. Kayla tensed, but the boy didn't fight. His voice came out dry, a whisper clinging to the edge of life. "You're her. The ghost." She didn't answer, just watched. He gave a weak, bitter smile. "He left us too. Said it wasn't strategic to save us. Tactical errors. Acceptable losses." The boy coughed, blood wetting his lips. "I followed him. I believed him." "Where?" she asked, her voice gravel now, worn to the core. He turned his head slowly toward the west. Black Ridge Tower, for clicks through the valley. Guards, drones, but no loyalty, only fear. His hand dropped from her wrist. He was dead before she stood. Kayla took the blade from his side and slid it into her belt. She offered no words, no ritual, only silence, then turned west. The valley narrowed, cliffs shadowing her path. Cracks in the stone whispered old tremors. She moved with the terrain, low and quiet, her eyes scanning for sentries. At dusk, she found them, two scouts in mismatched armor, rifles slung casually, too relaxed for a proper military perimeter. Vex had grown comfortable. Arrogance would make him sloppy. She watched them through a broken visor lens, used now as a scope. They laughed, traded a ration bar, unaware that death was breathing from stone outcrop above. She struck fast, first one, then the other. The blade made no sound save for the wet finality of contact. Their bodies slumped without resistance. She took one's access chip, used the other's helmet to scan terrain ahead. The tower's lights flickered in the dark like a beacon of betrayal. As she moved closer, her thoughts wandered to the moment her armor cracked, when the shrapnel lodged near her lung and Vex had turned his back. There had been no flare, no call for help, just orders. Jorn had tried to argue. She remembered. The medic had paused, one hand on her shoulder. But the captain's voice had been steel. She's done. Now, she wasn't. Not yet. She circled the base of the tower as the sun finally died behind the ridgeline, leaving the world in blue and shadow. The outer defenses were light, electronic barricades, motion sensors, but they had blind spots. The rebels manning them had been trained for occupation, not war. She found her opening behind a collapsed segment of wall, slithering through the crack like smoke. Inside, the tower pulsed with electricity. Hallways twisted in disrepair, steel ribs exposed where bulkheads had failed. The air smelled of burnt circuitry and oil. From behind a half-closed door, she heard voices. "He's not a soldier," someone whispered. "He's a politician with armor. You think he cares about any of us?" Another spat. "I think he cares about surviving. That makes him predictable." Kayla waited for them to move on before she slid down the corridor, heart drumming in her chest. She passed data terminals, flickering hollow screens, and empty helmets stacked like offerings. A shrine to those sacrificed. Then she found him. Vex Marrow stood at the center of the control chamber, hands behind his back, staring out over the ruined world like he still owned it. His armor gleamed, polished for appearance, not survival. A command pistol rested at his side. He looked well-fed, well-rested. She hated him for it, but not emotionally. With precision. "You're harder to kill than I anticipated," he said, not turning. Kayla said nothing. "I told him you were dead, that we mourned your loss." He turned slowly now, helmet under his arm, the arrogance in his smile brittle. "But part of me hoped I was wrong. You were always resilient. You call me a liability," she said. Vex tilted his head. "And you spent how many days proving me wrong?" He gestured to her suit. "I see you made improvements." She stepped forward. He raised a hand, as if to halt her. "I did what was necessary. Tactical withdrawal. We all make decisions out there, hard ones." "You made a choice," she said, "to let me die. And you made one to crawl out of the grave," he countered. "So now what, Kayla? Vengeance? Is that what's left of you?" Her silence answered for her. He reached for his pistol. She was faster. In one motion, the stolen blade found its mark between armor seams, under his ribs, slicing through the illusion of command. His pistol fell, clattering. He staggered back, eyes wide in disbelief. She caught him as he fell, steadying him like a dying brother. His lips parted, but the words never made it out. She looked into his eyes, not with rage but finality. When he stilled, she pulled the helmet from his arm and turned toward the door. Alarms began to ring in the distance. Voices shouted, but she didn't run. She walked, down the corridor, through the bodies of those who'd believed his promises, past the walls that had echoed with betrayal. She emerged into the night, bloodied, breathless, and burning with purpose. The helmet hung from her hand like a trophy. No, not a prize, a message. She had what she came for. But the war wasn't done with her yet. The morning after the tower fell, smoke still coiled lazily from its crumbled antennae like the breath of a sleeping beast. Kayla sat perched on a jagged overlook above the valley, the captain's helmet resting beside her like a relic unearthed from a darker age. Blood had dried on her fingers, in the seams of her armor. She hadn't cleaned it. There was no ritual for what came next. Below, the rebel forces had splintered. Vex's command structure had always been built on fear, and with him gone, his lieutenants had turned on each other in the night, arguing, posturing, some even fleeing into the hills. Kayla didn't bother intervening. She watched, measured. She wasn't a savior. She wasn't a queen. She was something else now, something they didn't have a name for. Jorn found her just past midday. His armor was scorched from some skirmish, but his voice remained steady, grounded in that quiet strength he'd never lost. You made it. Kayla didn't look at him at first. She wasn't sure what he'd see if she did. I saw the helmet, he added. Didn't think you'd keep it. She picked it up, turned it slowly in her hands. It's not a trophy. It's proof. Of what? That someone like him can be undone. That betrayal has a cost. She glanced at Joran, eyes tired but sharp. That were not all just expendable pieces on some board. He sat beside her without asking permission, scanning the camp below. They're waiting for leadership. Most don't know what to do now that he's gone. They should figure it out. They're scared, Kayla. Some of them followed Vex because they thought he'd win. Others because they had no choice. Doesn't make them innocent. No, he said carefully. But it doesn't make them all enemies either. She considered that. The line between ally and enemy had blurred so many times, it was little more than ash now, drifting between camps. Vex had twisted loyalties, pitted squads against each other, made survival a competition. Even now, his shadow lingered. Why are you here? She asked him finally. Jorn shrugged. Because I knew you'd come back, and because someone needs to keep the next bloodbath from starting. They'll tear each other apart. Not if you speak. She shook her head. I'm not a commander. You don't have to be. Just someone they trust. Someone who remembers what we were before. Kayla laughed once, dry and humorless. You mean before we were abandoned and left in the dirt? I mean before we forgot we were fighting for each other. He turned to face her fully. You survived more than Vex. You survived what he made us. The wind picked up, stirring the dust. In the distance, the sun was dipping low again, gilding the wreckage in dying gold. Kayla stood, the helmet in hand, and looked down at the scattered campfires, the broken mechs, the wounded limping between makeshift shelters. She saw fear, yes, but also the smallest flicker of something else. Resolve, weariness, maybe hope. She walked into camp without ceremony. Conversation stilled. All eyes turned to her, some wide, some narrowed, but all focused. She dropped the helmet into the dirt between them. It thudded with a finality that didn't need explanation. I'm not here to take his place, she said, voice clear. I'm not interested in becoming what he was. Murmurs stirred. Some looked uncertain, others skeptical. But I won't let him win, not from beyond the grave. Vex taught you to follow orders without thinking, to sacrifice each other for some illusion of progress. That ends now. You want to fight? Then fight for the ones beside you. Fight for yourselves. A woman near the edge of the circle raised her hand hesitantly. And if we don't? Kayla looked at her, expression unreadable. Then you keep surviving the best you can. No one's going to force you to stay. Someone else called out. What do we fight for now? Kayla took a breath. This was the moment she hadn't planned for. The moment vengeance gave way to something heavier. We fight so no one else ends up abandoned in the dirt. So no one else gets discarded when they break. We fight because we still can. Silence followed. Not cold, but considering. Then someone stepped forward. Joran. He stood beside her without fanfare, nodding once. Others followed one by one. A mechanic with soot on her face. A scout missing half his leg. A pair of comms officers who hadn't spoken since the tower fell. Kayla didn't smile. There wasn't time for that. They began organizing in clusters, repairing what they could, mapping nearby outposts. Kayla remained near the edge, directing when asked, but never from above. She refused the command tent, slept where the rest did, on hard ground, beneath jagged stars. In the nights that followed, word spread beyond the valley. Not of Vex Marrow's death, but of the ghost who returned from no man's land dragging her bones and her fury. Her name traveled faster than she did, twisted in retelling, but the message remained. The war had changed shape. New factions sent envoys, some seeking alliance, others testing her resolve. She accepted no titles, She gave no speeches. Her presence alone carried weight. Rumors said she didn't sleep, that her armor drank blood, that she could hear lies like echoes. She ignored them, let the myths grow. They kept the cowards cautious. Jorn stayed by her side, not as a second-in-command, but as a reminder. He kept her tethered when the rage threatened to spill over. She trusted him in a way she didn't fully understand, because he'd been there, because he hadn't turned away. One night, as they scouted a ruined outpost, she caught him watching her. "What is it?" she asked. "You're changing." She raised an eyebrow. "For the worse. For something else. Something we haven't seen yet. I'm not becoming Vex." "No," he said. "You're becoming something stronger. Not feared. Respected." She looked away, toward the horizon where distant fires flickered like dying stars. "I didn't come back to lead, Jorn. I came back to make sure they remembered." "They will," he said. "But maybe they'll remember something better than pain." She didn't answer. Not because she disagreed, but because hope still felt foreign in her mouth. In time, the makeshift army began to resemble something real. Not uniform, but unified. Different pasts, different scars, drawn together by one truth. Survival wasn't enough anymore. They needed something worth bleeding for. And Kayla, wounded, unrelenting, forged in betrayal, became their symbol. Not of victory, of defiance. The fractured moon still hung overhead, watching, waiting. The war wasn't over. But this time, she wasn't alone.